Yeah, so Bridge is a statewide publication in Michigan.
Beautiful.
And so there are readers from all around Michigan and maybe from other states as well. Maybe if you're from another state, drop that in the chat. We'd love to know. So I think now I've got everyone muted and unmuted as we need to do. So I just really briefly, before we get started, I want to introduce myself. I know I was doing a lot of chatting at the beginning, so you probably heard, but my name is Amber DeLind. I'm the membership director at Bridge. And we are just so honored that you're willing to take an hour out of your Friday afternoon before your weekend starts to come and talk with us and be part of the Bridge Book Club. Some of you might be new Bridge readers. Some of you might be longtime Bridge readers, but for those of you who might be new to Bridge, we are an online news source. We're nonprofit and nonpartisan. We've been around. The organization that we're a publication of, the Center for Michigan, has been around since 2006, and Bridge started publishing in 2011. So we are just about to celebrate our 9th birthday in September. We write about issues that face the state of Michigan, and we are data-driven. We do kind of news and analysis. We try to do investigative reporting where appropriate, and we're just we've had a lot of growth, particularly with all of the many things happening in our state and in our nation as well over the last few years. We used to be a bi-weekly publication, and now we're darn near daily, sometimes more than once, so more than once per day, as Monica is acutely aware. So I just want to, that's a little bit about Bridge. This is one of our first endeavors to try to engage readers in this age of coronavirus. So we're just really happy that you are also interested in being here. Just a really brief overview of what you can expect this evening. We will end promptly at 6:30 because I know that you all value your time and we value your time as well. So that's how this will work. Like I was mentioning in our sign-on, I would love for all of you to, any questions that you might have for author Bridgett Davis, please either write those right into the chat window, or if you are on the phone, you can email them to me. My email address is D as in dog, E as in elephant, L as in Linda, I, N as in Nancy, D as in dog at bridgemi.com. And we'll, as many of those as possible, we will get to this evening. Kind of the first half of this discussion, we've got some questions from the Bridge team that we'd love to ask Bridgett, and then we will turn it over the second half to your questions. We're going to keep everyone muted for the majority of this so that we can all hear each other, because there are quite a few of us on this Zoom. But for the last 10 minutes or so, give or take, we'll turn the mics back on so that everyone can talk with one another and ask any remaining questions that you might have. But with that, I would love to turn it over to my two colleagues who are here to introduce themselves. And then ultimately, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Monica, to kick us off and introduce our special guests. But perhaps, Katherine, could you introduce yourself and then kick it over to Monica?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Katherine Dougal, and I am the Development and Engagement Specialist at Bridge. So I kind of help with fundraising and community engagement as well. And I just want to give a big shout out to Monica for making this happen in the age of COVID. So Monica, thank you so much. And I'll let Monica take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Williams, as was mentioned, and I'm one of 3.5 editors at Bridge. I am, we've had engagement, as those of you who've been members with us for a while know we typically have engagement events in person, but with the age of coronavirus, I was really trying to think of a way that we could still engage with our membership in a different way. And so this came to mind, and we are so excited and so delighted that you chose to join us because we weren't really sure if people would bite or this would take off, and it did. We allowed you to select the book and the author. We just put several Michigan theme. That was sort of what we looked at. And this was chosen overwhelmingly. I don't want no shade to any other author. But it's, it's an interesting story. And so I'm super excited to have Bridgett, a fellow Detroit native, with us for this conversation. She's the author of the book you've all read, and I will turn this over to her to give us a little bit of an introductory reading and an introduction of herself.
Oh, a reading. That's right. Oops. Let me just grab a book. I'll be right back. So Monica, while I'm looking for a page, could you tell everyone that we actually crossed paths years and years ago?
Yes, it may date us a little bit.
That's okay. I already dated myself, you know. I outed my age in the book, so.
So I was a journalism student in Philadelphia and interned at the paper where Bridgett was a reporter in what year was that?
The 80s.
In the 1980s. So I was an intern while she was there. And so we have that connection as well. And I've actually read her novels because we have mutual friends and people we know, and I'm a fan. And so when the book came up, it was like, oh, I know that name. I hope.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I love when things, when relationships and interactions come full circle, it feels pretty cool. That's one of the great things about having the book out in the world, the number of people that, have come back into my life. I really am very touched by that, including my very first playmate in my childhood home, whom I played with when we were 3 years old. When I did a reading at the Detroit Public Library, I was signing books, and this woman stood before me and she said, "Do you know who I am? I'm Sandbox Susie." I was like, "Susie? My next door neighbor from when we were 3 years old?" She said, "Yeah, I just drove down from Kalamazoo to say hi to you." So she read the book and she saw her name in it. She's like, "That's me. I'm that neighbor." So basically I hadn't seen her in over 50 years. So that's the power of telling a story and, sort of creating community on the page and off the page, All right, so I'm going to read now because we don't have a lot of time, I know. Okay, here we go. So this is just a very short excerpt that I'll read first, and then we can chat about it or about anything you want to ask. So here we go. One day, I decided to organize Mama's number running materials and went through the entire house, gathering everything together into one shallow cardboard box. I was enamored of my own organizational skills and decided to add one final touch. On the side of the box, using bright pink nail polish, I carefully painted in boxy letters, Mama's numbers. I proudly showed this to my mother, impressed with myself for remembering the possessive apostrophe. She took one look and said, "You can't put my business out in the street like that." Looking back, this was the moment when I became consciously aware that I must keep my admiration for my mother's work a private experience. Before, I had known to keep her livelihood a secret, but hadn't yet formed an opinion of, felt any pride in, what Mama actually did for a living. Now I understood that my pride for her also had to be kept secret, as did all the evidence of her work. Chastened, I took my black magic marker and scratched out what I had painted onto the box. And after that episode, I began shoving things into drawers away from visitors' view. Yet, to my delight, Mama continued to keep all her paraphernalia in that box, which ended up permanently perched atop a Louis XV style chair in her bedroom. If I looked closely, I could still see the pink letters I had painted beneath the blackout marker. And whenever I passed by, I would chant to myself, incantation style, Mama's numbers, Mama's numbers, Mama's numbers. So it's a little bit. So do you guys just want to start with some questions, or how do you want to do it?
Okay, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. That was
Zoom
great.
is so funny.
Yeah, that was great reading, and very fitting for the first question I had for you, because you talk about how difficult it is to decide, you know, whether to telling your mother's story, whether to tell it, because you know, she kept her business secret.
Yeah.
Why did you ultimately decide to share Fannie's story with the world?
Well, it was a process, trust me. It took years. And during those years, I wasn't grappling with the decision. I had just decided not to tell because that was the natural impulse. You know, I went through my whole life not telling. And let me say, because it wasn't a dark secret, I wasn't burning to tell it. You know, often when there's a secret in our lives and it's traumatic, it's as though we can't rest until we tell that secret. Well, that wasn't the case with me. I was like, you know what? I would rather tell no one than risk people judging my mom and sort of not understanding the choices she made. It just didn't seem worth it to me. I wanted to really honor her secret and her very clear message to me that no good can come from you running your mouth. I believed her. Even after she had died, I still believed that. But here's the thing that happened. My son was about 10 years old, and he saw a picture of my mother on the dresser. And he very innocently looked at it and said, "What was she like?" And I said, oh, she was amazing. And as I've told many people, at that point, my heart started breaking. Because I knew then, I was clear what had happened. I had done a great job of keeping my mom's secret, but I had actually kept her secret from my own children. And at that point, I thought, this isn't good. I have to tell this story. And I literally, within 2 weeks, I was on a plane talking to my mom's remaining sister, my Aunt Florence, and I was asking her permission. But, you know, and she gave me her permission. She was like, hell yeah, tell that story. Because Fannie was amazing and what she did was unheard of. She's like, I'm going to help you tell it. So that was really the sort of validation that I needed to go forward. But as I think about it more and more, and people ask that question, I realize that the deep down reason that I finally decided to tell the story is because I was afraid of forgetting. I realized that as every year passed, it was getting more and more into the distant past. And after all, think about it. The numbers is an ephemeral thing. There are no records really that were left behind. People didn't talk about it. It's been decades since the lottery became legal. And so the numbers doesn't really exist the way it once did. So what would happen if I didn't tell the story? Suddenly, I realized, oh my God, this is my mission in life. I'm the person to do this. No one else can do it. I'm perfectly poised to be the one to do it. So then I became driven. And the thing that I had been grappling with and not able to tell, suddenly I was in the throes of writing this story and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And once the book came out, I couldn't stop talking about it. because I understood finally why I needed to tell.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
What role do you think that your place in the family, as the youngest child, played in your perception of her story? Do you think it allowed you to see her and perceive her in different ways than other members of your family?
Absolutely. I think that where you fall in the constellation of the family dynamic means everything. I once heard this quote from someone who said that every child is born into a different family. Because if you're the firstborn, that's one family, right? If you're the middle child, that's really a different family. And certainly if you're the baby of 5, it's a different family. So there were things that were amazing for me as the baby of the family. As you could imagine, I was spoiled, I was doted on, I was a daddy's girl. My mother also was really quite indulgent in the best possible ways. And also I had a vantage point. My siblings were actually several years older than me. And so I had this way in which I could be an observer. Maybe I was always a writer, and many writers, when you look back on their childhoods, they'll tell you they used to do a lot of observing, but it was really a position that I could hold as the baby. Less was expected of me. My older siblings were helping my mother run the business. I had a lot of time, and I had the privilege to just watch a lot. And I think that gave me a way to see my mother in a special way. I also think that by the time she got to the 5th child, she had learned a lot, and she was possibly more indulgent. And I was able to speak my mind in a way that my oldest sister said, huh, I wish, So all of those things made a difference. I think that at one point I was the only child at home with her because my older siblings were out in the world. And my sister Rita was away at college. So again, because I had that unique relationship and perspective, I was able to see her in a way that maybe my siblings weren't. So yeah. Yeah.
You've also written 2 novels and a film.
Yeah.
Tell us
Busy.
a little bit more about the experience of writing a memoir versus writing a novel.
Yeah, it's different. It's funny because I trained as a journalist, as Monica knows, and so maybe the most natural thing would have seemed to be to write a nonfiction book, and yet I never was interested in that. I was always interested in writing novels. I feel as though novels help you to get to a greater truth that you don't have to allow the facts to get in the way of in your pursuit of the truth. It's like you write a novel to figure out what's going to happen and what you're trying to say. And when I approached the memoir, I was really trying to find the best way to describe what had happened. And those are 2 different impulses, and 2 different goals. But the funny thing is, I'm grateful I didn't write this memoir sooner, because I used all of my knowledge about storytelling that I had learned from being a fiction writer and was able to apply it to the story that really happened. Same with filmmaking, I spent the 90s as a filmmaker, so I wrote a couple screenplays and, produced a feature and, had this real immersion in visual storytelling. And so when I sat down to write the memoir, again, I couldn't help but use those techniques because they were at that point just part of how I write. But I'm grateful for that because it felt to me, another reason I waited so long to tell this story, it felt like it deserved for me to be writing at my best and for my chops to be strong. I didn't want to practice on this story. So I absolutely found out that, oh my God, I love writing nonfiction. Surprise, surprise, you know, because I started out as a writer in the capacity of being a journalist, but I really loved it. And funny thing, the novels took years to write. The memoir took years for me to get up the courage to write it. And it took years to go around the country and interview all these various people, family members, relatives, friends, colleagues of my mom's, all kinds of people. But the writing part went very quickly, ironically. I wrote it, it took me less than a year.
Wow.
I know, go figure.
Be impressive. So Grace on one of our readers has a follow-up about keeping the secret. Did you ever feel that carrying the secret of your mother's business was a burden for you?
I never felt that way. I never felt it was a burden. And I have often in recent years tried to tease that out. I guess it's because my mother never made us feel as though it was a heavy secret. She was pretty matter of fact. You know, this is a legitimate business. It just happens to be illegal. And so that's why you can't tell anyone. But you see what it provides for us. You see what it does for the community. You see how it helps folks, create some kind of windfalls in their own lives. It's doing a lot of good for people. So there was no negativity attached to it. And I think that helped me feel that it wasn't a burden. One time I slipped up and told by mistake. I told a little too much to a customer. And fortunately, my mother didn't freak out. And she said, "You're a child. It's a lot to ask of a child. But listen, you can't do that again, okay?" And I was like, "I promise I won't." So I know it had everything to do with how my mom handled it, right? The environment she created around it. And then it was just like, who wants to talk about what their parents do for a living? It didn't even seem interesting to me to bring up. So all that helped me move through the world. What became a burden really was not being able to talk about my mom. And of course, what she did for a living was tied to who she was. So that was a burden. And I realized you just have to tell everybody what you did because you really want to tell them who she was. You know, quiet as it's kept, what I really wanted to write about was my mother. I told the publishers I wanted to tell the story about her life in the numbers. And they were like, wow, okay. But really, I just wanted to talk about her. So that was my way to do it.
Yeah, I think you did your mom proud.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
How about, can you tell us more your thoughts about the legalization of the state lottery in Michigan and its expansion over the years?
Yeah. There are so many ironies in the legalization of the lottery, so many, because people didn't know, I didn't know until I was writing the book and researching it and doing and learning all this history that, you know, the US has had lotteries as part of its culture from the beginning, from the beginning. So the idea that there was something wrong with playing numbers was really some very contrived kind of accusation that was leveled at Black folks. Because, you know, lotteries were legal in the US until they were banned in the 1800s. Why were they banned? Because they were a little too equitable. The wrong people, if you get my drift, were buying lottery tickets and winning, including slaves. So that couldn't continue. And for nearly 100 years, they were illegal. And most of that time, the illegal operations were being run by whites. So people don't know that. But by the time there was this thing called the numbers invented in the early 1920s, it was a Black business and it moved through the country. And authorities from the beginning, they and the organized crime, they all wanted to take it over. And it just took states a while to figure out how to ultimately legalize that business and try to snatch it from the majority Black folks who ran it. So they did. In Michigan, they finally figured it out. And in 1972, you know, they put the vote before the people, and people voted to legalize them. And it's so funny because by the time they got around to creating a game that was exactly like the numbers, they were not even, lottery officials were not even coy about it at that point. They just stole the concept, whole cloth. They called it literally the same. They used the same methods. They advertised in ways that were basically rip-offs of what Black folks had been doing all along. You know, it's like, oh, you want to play your birthday? You can do that. You got a hunch? You can play your number. I mean, they use the same language in their ads. So I always think of it as equivalent to what we have seen with cannabis. And the decades, thanks to, they pretty much pinpointed to Nixon and Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, this criminalization of marijuana, right? And the people who smoked it, largely targeting African Americans. And all those decades of criminalizing it and incarcerating so many people for the use, for the possession of marijuana and for the sale of marijuana. And so what has happened, you know, the sort of understanding of the financial benefits of legalizing marijuana has changed people's moral attitudes about it. And now suddenly, you know, people have dispensaries. But it's not the people who were being, you know, prosecuted for smoking it, if you'll notice. No, it's a whole different group of people who are benefiting from the legalization of it. So to me, they're very similar. And it's as though history is repeating itself. Or as my mother used to say, white folks, when they want to get away with something, they just make a law. And that's basically what happened.
Wow, that's a great comparison. Great comparison. Would you like to read a little more?
Let's see. Full disclosure, I didn't pick a part in advance, but I will now. How many minutes do I have? Like 5? Not long, right?
Right.
Okay. How about, should I read the shoe story? A little brief excerpt from the shoe story?
Oh, that would be great.
Okay. All right. All right. So this is about a 3 or 4 minute excerpt, okay?
Okay, it's great. Perfect.
All right. I am a first grader. In class, I wait in line to show my teacher, Miss Miller, my assignment. We have had to color paper petals, cut them out, and paste them onto a picture of a flower. I like mine, as I have glued each one just at the base so that the petals now reach out into a pop-up flower. Miss Miller looks over my work, gives it 1 star instead of 2, and stops me before I can return to my seat. You sure do have a lot of shoes, she says. Last week, she asked what my father did for a living, and because I knew never to disclose the family business, I said, he doesn't work. She asked, well, what does your mother do? I froze. I'm not sure, I lied. I knew my mother was in the numbers, but I also knew not to tell that to anyone. I worried that my vague answer was the wrong one, but I didn't know a better response. No one had told me yet what I should say. Now, with Miss Miller staring at me, I look down at my feet, which are clad in, I still remember, light blue patent leather slip-ons with lace-trimmed buckles. A favorite pair bought to match a brocade ensemble I have just worn for Easter. I nod, not knowing what else to do. Before you sit down, I want you to name every pair of shoes you have, she insisted. Go ahead. There's no lightness in her voice. Anxious, I go through a mental inventory of the shoes that line the built-in rack in my bedroom closet. I manage to recall 10 pairs in various colors and styles. The black and white polka dotted ones with a bow tie, the buckled ruby red ones, the salmon pink lace-ups. 10 pairs is an awful lot, says Miss Miller. Her blue eyes fix on me with something I can't name, but which I would now call disdain, and she orders me to take my seat. I can feel my classmates staring at me as I return to my table. Is it wrong to have so many pairs of shoes? Did my mother get them in a bad way? The next day in class, Miss Miller calls me back to her desk. I can smell the hairspray in her teased, blonde bouffant. You didn't mention you had white shoes, she snaps. Indeed, I'm wearing a white version of the same pair I wore the previous day. I feel as though I've been caught in a lie, and I know I've disappointed my teacher. I worry that I'll get in trouble at school, or worse, at home. I'm sorry, I whisper. Miss Miller shakes her head in disgust and dismisses me with a wave of her hand. I return to my desk, trying hard not to look down at my shoes. I am ashamed of them. That evening, I tell Mama what happened, but I wait until after she's finished taking her customers' bets and before the day's winning numbers come out. I have already learned that the best time to tell Mama difficult news, something that could get you in trouble, is during that brief, expectant pause in the day. That's when Mama's least distracted and still in a good mood. She listens. And when I confess I forgot to tell Miss Miller about the 11th pair of shoes, her dark eyes flash with anger. I fear a spanking. That is none of her damn business, she says. Who does she think she is? Before I can feel relief that she's not mad at me, Mama says, get your coat and let's go. I do as I'm told. Mama throws on her soft blue leather coat, the color of the periwinkle crayon in my Crayola box. And together we slide into her new Buick Riviera. Are we headed back to school to confront Miss Miller? Thank God, no. As Mama turns heads south away from Winterhalter Elementary, and she soon turns onto 2nd Avenue, drives to the corner of Lothrop, and parks in front of the new Center building. There sits Saks Fifth Avenue. We enter through regal double doors, and I instantly fall in love with the store's marble floors and brass elevators and bright chandeliers. I feel lucky just being here. Mama takes my hand and leads me to the children's shoe department, where an array of options spreads before us. She points to a pair of yellow patent leather shoes. Those are pretty, she says. Perhaps the saleswoman looks at us askance, given how rare it must have been to see Black people inside Detroit's upscale shops in the 60s, but I don't remember. What I do remember is how nonchalantly Mama opens her wallet, pulls out a $100 bill, and pays for the shoes, while the saleswoman looks at her the way Miss Miller had looked at me. When we get home, Mama says, you're gonna wear these to school tomorrow. And you better tell that damn teacher of yours that you actually have a dozen pairs of shoes. You hear me? The next day, I wear my brand new shoes with a matching yellow knit dress. Nervous as I walk up to my teacher's desk, I announce, Miss Miller, I have 12 pairs of shoes. She looks down at my feet and then levels those blue eyes at my face. Sit down. Miss Miller never says another word to me. I feel her rejection, but I am also relieved. I no longer have to worry about what I wear to school or feel bad about my nice things. I feel both protected and indulged by mama. Growing up, that's how it was for me and my 3 older brothers, my 3 older sisters, and my brother. We lived well thanks to mama and her numbers, which inured us from judgment. My mother's message to Black and white folks alike was clear. It's nobody's business what I do for my children, nor how I manage to do it. Yeah. Thanks. It's like silent clapping. Nice.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. Thank you. Yeah, it's very poignant.
Yeah.
Probably I think that was my favorite part of the book.
Thank you. Yeah.
He told her.
Yeah.
So a New York Times reviewer noted that a central question of this memoir is who gets to be lucky?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? What kind of societal factors play into luck and success?
Yeah, I love that quote. I thought that was the best line of that review. It really nailed it, right? It is about that. It is about that. You know, the truth is I use that word loosely because my mom used to say this and I felt like she bore it out in her own life, that luck is really, you know, that famous quote, luck is preparation meeting opportunity. And that was the best way to describe my own mother. Like, yes, she was a lucky woman, but she cultivated luck, for one thing, and she was always prepared for it. And she made it clear, this business I'm running isn't just about my hoping to be lucky. Like, I have worked at it, I've researched it, I've put some measures in place, I've done the work to ensure the best possible circumstances for luck to occur. And I'm prepared for when it's the opposite too. So she really taught me that, you know, luck is not a random thing. It's something that you set up for yourself. And she taught me that, you know, if you're a Black person in this country, there are myriad ways in which you can be unlucky. Like, at no cost of your own, your whole life can be ruined if not taken from you. So luck, for, I believe, in the Black community is not a whimsical thing at all. It is self-protection. I just need to make sure that, for instance, I'm moving through, you know, one state to the other in my car. I want to be lucky and not be stopped by the police. Well, that, you're asking for that luck, not just so something good can happen to you. You're asking for it so your life can be protected and saved. So it's a very different way that we talk about luck, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I have more feelings about it, but I just think that that's a really powerful a very powerful word in Black culture. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Have you been back to the area lately or recently?
All the time.
Okay.
Well, first, I mean, one great thing about writing this book is that my family saw me a lot. You know, prior to doing the research for this memoir, you know, research that I started a decade ago, quite frankly. My first interviews were in 2010. And prior to that, you know, I had young children. I had a full life in New York. I didn't get home that much. But then I was able to literally carve out space because I was researching the book to get back to Detroit regularly. And for the past 10 years, I've been able to do that on a pretty consistent basis. And especially after the book came out, I've been fortunate. Folks keep inviting me back. Like, folks in Detroit really love to embrace the book. The last trip I took before the shutdown, I remember this well. March 11th, I landed in Detroit. And as soon as I landed, suddenly the World Health Organization had declared a global pandemic, and the NBA had canceled its season, and Tom Hanks was sick and had the virus. And I was like, oh my God, none of this existed when I got on the plane. It was wild, but I did my event at the Charles Wright Museum that night. And I had an event at Wayne County Community College that was canceled the next day. And I always say, I got on that plane on a Wednesday and we were being precautious, sure. Oh, I better make sure I take my wipes and wipe down the snack tray. By that Friday, when I was flying back to New York, I was like, no, flight attendant, I don't even need a snack. No, thanks. Everyone, like the shift in the consciousness was incredible. But for me, it was incredible because while I was in Detroit, I made sure I ran around and hugged all my loved ones. Like I got to hug my nearly 90-year-old Aunt Florence, my mom's remaining sister. I don't know when I'll see her again because we don't know when we'll be able to travel in the same way and because of social distancing and all those things. So it was actually not what you were asking me, but I'm very full about that being the last opportunity I had to go anywhere was to Detroit. Mm-hmm. So I will tell you that when I go back, it's always like this strange dissonance. And I laugh because I had to really get comfortable with this area people kept talking about. Even my friend I grew up with who, you know, we've been friends forever. And she was always like, well, we'll go to this restaurant in Midtown. I'm like, okay. Oh, there's a gallery in Midtown. I'm like, okay. And then I was like, excuse me, what the hell is Midtown? And she's like, oh yeah, that's this whole section of Detroit now, you know, near Wayne State. I was like, okay, I'm with you on that. All right, it's Midtown now. So that's just an example of how much the city has evolved from what it was. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on the rapid development. It just seems to, it seems to change so quickly. And
yeah, it's deep. The short answer is I'm both so hopeful for the city and deeply concerned. Because I think that amidst all this, I'm not sure I'm seeing a space for a thriving Black middle class to return. Detroit was traditionally known for its Black middle class. Like a lot of people don't know this, but at one point, Detroit had more homeowners than any other major city. And this was basically Black folks owning their homes. So we have a tradition and a legacy that I would love to see us get back to. What I love about the city now is that, you know, it is an exciting place and a lot of people are focused on it and coming back to it. And there's this bubbling up of entrepreneurial spirit, and that's beautiful. But I just am very concerned that it's going to leave out the people who endured and stayed put and made sure Detroit didn't go anywhere. You know, like, don't they deserve, in my estimation, they deserve first dibs.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a few reader questions if you're.
There are all these great comments in the chat. Like,
no.
Yeah, beautiful comments.
So do the numbers continue? This is from May. I don't know if it's Mame or Mamie. Please forgive me if I mispronounce your name. But if, she says congratulations on the book. Do the numbers continue today? And what does that look like?
I'm chuckling because I just asked my cousin Jewel, who's referenced in the book. She's my Aunt Florence's daughter. I was like, Jewel, did COVID-19 get in the way of the numbers? She was like, nope. Folks figured out. I said, well, how are they doing it now? Cash App. And what about when you have to, you know, deliver something? She's like, oh, folks know to put it in a place and you don't have any contact with anyone, and then you have your gloves on and you go pick up that bag. People figured it out. So this is the thing, the numbers never left. They never went anywhere. Just as my mother came up with this ingenious design, this ingenious idea in which she would start using the legal lottery's daily winning numbers for her own informal business. Everybody does that now. And while it's much, much smaller than it was in its heyday, there are still people. Now understand what I'm saying here. There are still people who would rather give their money to like the present day Fannie in the city, to Miss Lucille, or, you know, to a neighbor who's actually a local bookie, than to give it to the state. That's how they feel. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are advantages to that. You know, you don't pay taxes if you win. But more importantly, folks understand what it means to have money generate through their own community. And that's what they would rather do. Yeah.
Let's see if we have any other questions. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead and type them in the group chat.
Does this look like beer? Because it's not. It's actually kombucha.
Oh, I love kombucha.
You do? Yeah. It's this brand called Love. It's really delicious. Brew Doctor. And
It's okay if you drink beer, though.
No. The flavor's called Love. It has lavender and chamomile and jasmine tea. Yeah.
Someone asked what happened to Rita and if she ever married.
So Rita did not marry. And sadly, my sister suffered from lupus for over 20 years, and she succumbed to lupus back in 2000, unfortunately. So she didn't get to see the book. And funny thing, a conversation I had with her is what really was the impetus for me to start writing this book. Even though I didn't officially start for some time, it was really thanks to a conversation with her that I even began the process. So for me, she's as much a part of the book as all my siblings and all my relatives and my whole extended community. It's like, in my mind, that's how you help give someone eternity. You know, they live on. When you read about her, she lives on. The fact that someone just said her name now means everything to me. She lives on. So thank you for that.
I think we're going to turn the mics back on and allow people to chat or ask questions. Here's one. What advice can you give educators to give students engaged? John is asking that. He says, you talking about making your mother proud was such an inspiration. So what advice can you give to educators?
Do you mean in terms of teaching the history, or what exactly would you be referring to?
He says both. Let's see. John, can you be more specific? What advice? Both. I am impressed with your work. I know one of the questions we had earlier is what advice you can give to aspiring writers.
Yeah. So I'll try to answer both. First, I'll think about educators. I'm an educator. I've been teaching college now for 30 years. And I really believe that students are excited by the stories that become relevant to them because you've related those stories to their lives. And that's a lot of the feedback that I've gotten from college students of mine who read the book. They feel like, even though this is recent history and it feels like a history book in a lot of ways, what they really tell me that resonates with them is those sort of universal themes of just being a child and coming of age and grappling with the sort of dynamics in a household, and wanting to do right by your parents, but wanting to do right by yourself. Like those are universal themes. And I think that you can find those. I try to find those in anything I'm teaching. Like, what is the sort of humanizing connection between this history or this story or this subject matter that speaks to something very similar to what any particular student could be going through. That's really, for me, I guess that's also what I do as a writer too, right? And I think it's vital, because then you're not just teaching students something, but you're really dialoguing with them about how history is speaking to them. History and what you're teaching, it should all be a dialogue between that author's work or that particular piece of history or that subject matter and you and the students. That's what it ought to be. And that's sort of how I approach teaching. Advice for young writers or emerging writers. I think that it's important to honor the experience of showing up to the page on a regular basis. I know some writers say, you don't have to write every day, but I think you don't have to, but why wouldn't you? Like, my attitude about that is, when you actually show up every day, you are saying, this matters to me. I'm carving this space out. I deserve to carve this space out, to figure out what I want to say on the page. It can just be 5 minutes a day. Believe it or not, if you do that, if you sit down to write every day for 5 minutes and you make it a religious activity, you actually develop a rhythm and a muscle for writing. And the fact that you give yourself that permission is the most important part of that process. Not what you write, but the fact that you're giving yourself permission to write. And suddenly 5 minutes will grow. It'll be 10, it'll be 15. Believe me, I've been a writer my whole life. There were times, especially when I had young children, when sometimes all I got each day was 30 minutes, but I was determined to take those 30 minutes. Because whatever you produce in those minutes, if you hadn't written that day, maybe you would have never come up with that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when you show up to the work, you let the magic come out, whether it's a line or 5 pages. But if you don't show up to the work, you'll never know what you could have produced. So
that's great. So what are you writing in the age of coronavirus and quarantine?
You know what I'm writing? It turns out that the book has been optioned, as they say. It's going to be a screenplay and then a film. So I'm working on the screenplay. Yeah. Yes, I'm very excited about that. Very excited, actually. I wasn't sure it was going to happen, but it did. You know, I'm really feeling good about the producers who are planning to develop it into a film, because I trust them. It turns out it's Brad Pitt's company in Hollywood, Plan B.
Oh, wow.
They have a great track record. I mean, they did Moonlight, they did Selma, they did 12 Years a Slave, they did The Departed, they did Big Short. They're really, they did, if any of you haven't seen If Beale Street Can Talk, it's so beautiful. So they did that. You know, they really know what they're doing. So all through this slowdown, Governor Cuomo calls it a pause. All through this pause, I've been working on the screenplay.
Congratulations, that's great. Can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you. To spread the word.
Yeah.
Who would you want to play you?
Oh my God. The first time someone asked me that, I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, Bridgett, someone would have to play you. And I was like, that never occurred to me. I'm focused on who would play my mom, right?
Yeah.
Well, my top choice, and there are a lot of amazing actors who could do it, and that's exciting to think that there are several that could do it. I'm really grateful for that, because that wasn't always the case. But my top choice is Regina Taylor.
Oh,
yeah. You guys know who she is? No. So she did win an Oscar for her role in this film, If Beale Street Could Talk. but she's also, you know, what's that show that she's in on television right now? Yeah, I should know, right? I always want to say Westworld, but that's not it. It's another W show. Does anyone know? I'm gonna look it up while we're talking.
The Watchmen.
The Watchmen. Thank you. I'm always like, Watchmen. Yeah, The Watchmen. Yeah, I just think she'd be amazing. So I've been a fan of hers for a long time. Yeah.
Amber, you wanna?
Oh, someone said Lizzo. That's funny.
I don't think there's anything that Lizzo couldn't do. So
yeah, that's so true.
So we are running up near the end of our time here. So if there's nothing else that we want to say on the microphones, I think I'm going to unmute everyone so that we can all. There's going to be some crosstalk here, so please bear with us with that. But that way, just that everyone get a chance to interact with one another if you'd like to before we sign off. But before I do that, I just want to thank times a million Bridgett Davis for joining us. This has been a pure delight. We're so honored. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Thank you all. I appreciate it. It's nice to have met you all, sort of, through Zoom. Yeah. And I hope you all stay safe. Have a great weekend ahead of you. And thanks for reading the book.
Thank you for writing it. Thank you to my colleagues, Monica and Catherine. Monica in particular, who came up with this idea and our great interviewer. And Catherine for gathering all of our questions. So I'm going to unmute all of us. I'll keep things going for a couple minutes here, and feel free to sign out if you need to, and have a great night and a great weekend. Thanks, Bridge readers.
All right, I'm going to sign out. Thank you. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Great book.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bridge readers. Hope to see you next time when we do this again. And if you have any ideas for books, please email them to us. I'll send out a follow-up on this, a little survey to just ask you what you thought and how we can do it better. And I'll include a field for book suggestions. So
thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for supporting Bridge.
I know. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end it. Enjoy your weekend.